My name is Adenike Adegbola, and this is my story. Since I was 2 years old, my mom told me to stop sleeping in our room. I didn't sleep in the children's room either, but in my father's room. After a while, people started calling me iyawo baba, which means my father's wife. I grew up knowing what love was because my father showed me so much love. Sometimes, I couldn't sleep unless I was lying on his chest. His chest became my bed and comfort. My father never allowed anyone, not even my mother, to beat me. The main argument I saw between my parents were because my mother beat me and my father didn't like it. Sometimes they wouldn't talk to each other for days because of me. My father was a successful businessman. I loved playing with my father's bears because they were well laid around his jaw. I sat on his lap and played with his bears anytime I was hungry. It had a way of pacifying my hunger. I love it when I see his mountain struggling around his boxes. Then I began to play with his manhood anytime I see it rise. My father loved it when I play with it, but he never allowed me to do it whenever my mother was around. My father's mountain became my toy, and any day I didn't play with it, he reminds me, "Nike, you have not played with daddy's toy." When he noticed my mother may get to know one day, we restricted the toy play only to bedtime. That continues until I was 13. Whenever my father traveled, I often got sick and would only get better when he came back. My love for him was special, and he could put up with all my flaws. My father was a good man, that much I knew. My father became like a magical presence in my life. I felt I couldn't be without him. I trusted him completely because he never hurt me and always tried to keep me from crying. He was the friend I could rely on, always close and ready to listen. He was so different from my mother, who was harsh, inconsiderate, unloving, and quick-tempered. I didn't worry about anything because my father was kind to all of us, including my siblings. Grace and I were just like him in every way, but Faith and Christy were more like our mom, unfriendly and difficult. My bond and intimacy with my father continued until I finished my junior secondary school education, and my mother began to nurse the idea of changing my day school to boarding. From the onset, I knew that won't work because my father will not be part with me neither. Will I ever want to stay away from my dad for such a long time? So, it was going to be 1 against 2. It became a serious battle between dad and mom for a long time. My daughter will never go to boarding school, and I won't let anyone initiate them into witchcraft, my dad would say often. My dad was the first to know when I started menstruating. I had already had 2 periods before my mom found out. Before my mom could teach me about a woman's cycle, my father had already explained it to me. My mom talk about womanhood felt like a reversion because Dad had already taught me everything I need to know. He always knew right away when I got sick and was there for us, unlike Mom, who was often focused on her career. I would rather talk to Dad than waste time trying to get Mom to listen. Even when she did listen, she wouldn't hurt until things got worse. My mom was a successful banker, and she took great pride in her job. Her career meant a lot to her as she had worked hard to reach the position she held. Even when she was sick, she would push herself to go to work. The first lesson I learned from my mom was the danger of prioritizing a career over family. She gave all herself to work, but we often felt neglected. Her intention may have been good, but her mistake made it hard to see that. As I grew older, I noticed that Mom and Dad hardly spent time together. Mom was always busy with her office work and church activities. If not for us, Dad would have been lonely. We became his close companion while Mom was often unavailable. My dad understood my menstrual cycle so well that he even planned ahead for it. He bought my pad in advance without me knowing. After the first talk Mom gave me about womanhood, she never followed up again. She left me to figure things out on my own. I could have faced a lot of problems if it weren't for my dad, who was always there for me. This was why I couldn't imagine leaving him for boarding school. Who will give me the same career and attention? Who will be as friendly and understanding as my dad? Who will tolerate me like he did? This question ran through my mind every day. The journey of my sorrow begins on the 2nd of August, when my dad got sick and my mom wasn't around to take care of him, even though I was a young girl. I took on the role of both mother and wife, stepping in to fill the gap my mom left due to her busy schedule. 3 days later, my dad recovered and was back to his normal self. By the time our bond has grown deeper than a typical father-daughter relationship. On the 2nd of August, my dad came into my room. I had stopped sleeping in his room because we could no longer justify it, given my age. To avoid any suspicion, he allowed me to move into the other room. "How are you, Nike?" he asked, looking straight into my eyes. I felt an unusual sensation wash over me when he looked at me. "I'm okay, Dad," I replied. He sat on my bed and started to massage my hair. This wasn't the first time he has done that. He has done the same with my other sisters, even in front of Mom. But that day, the feelings was completely different. He left after 5 minutes, but that visit was what broke the camel's back. He returned 30 minutes later, "Nike, I hope you are okay," he said. "Dad, why are you worried about me? I'm fine," I replied. "Alright, come give Daddy a hug." I moved closer and hugged my dad like I have done many times before. But this time, he seemed to have an ulterior motive in his look. "Nike, do you know how much I love you?" he asked. "Yes, Daddy. I know you love me very much. I love you too," I replied. He kissed my forehead and said, "That's Daddy's baby." I had so much confidence in my dad, so I had no fear for anything. He held me so tightly and began to unbutton my blouse in a way that suggests he wanted to have a carnal knowledge of me. Before I could say "Daddy," he grabbed my two boobs firmly. "Give me this one chance, and I'll prove to you how much I love you," my dad begged me as his face was full of pity. I had never argued with or denied my dad anything, but this was a crossroad for me. "But why do you want to do this to me, Daddy?" I asked, as tears began to run down my cheeks. "You are a beautiful girl with irresistible body. I want to do this because I haven't done it with your mom for a long time. She practically denies me anytime I make advances. I'm starved and I know you won't let Daddy to starve forever when you have the answers in between your legs." My mom was promoted to branch manager and transferred to Ibadan to head a new branch. This was what she had worked for all those years. Becoming a branch manager had been her dream for many years. Mom was thrilled about her new position, but the transfer didn't sit well with Dad or the rest of us. But she didn't give Dad a chance to protest when she started making her plans. Within 2 weeks, Mom had contacted an agent in Ibadan through a colleague and secured a 2-bedroom flat on the outskirts of the city. When Mom left for Ibadan, I knew it was the start of trouble for Dad's marriage. I don't want to say anything that makes you think I don't support your progress, but leaving your family now isn't healthy, Dad protested. What was I supposed to do? Resign or turn down the position I have worked so much hard for? This is God's opportunity, and I can't afford to throw it away. Instead of celebrating with me, you are here talking about family. Our children are all grown, and Nike can take care of her sisters well. I will always come home for this weekend, Mom replied as she instructed Faith and Christy to move her things into the waiting van outside. We weren't going to miss Mom so much because her temporary departure will give us a sense of freedom and peace. We will finally be free from our naggings and troubles. Mom couldn't keep her promise to come home every weekend. Some months, she will only came once or twice. I became hostile in the house, and everyone could tell something was wrong, but none of my sisters were matured enough to dig deeper and find out what was happening. I perfected my plan to poison my dad, but it wasn't easy twice. I intended to put the poison in his food, but I always ended up discarding it. Just seeing him irritating me. I wish he could die in an accident or from some mysterious cases. But none of that ever happened. For 3 months, I rarely spoke to my dad, even though we lived under the same roof. Whenever Mom visited, she never suspected anything because I put on a facade that everything was fine. As soon as she returned to Ibadan, I will retreat back into my shell. On Sunday, our pastor delivered a powerful sermon, Forgiveness. He highlighted 7 reasons why forgiving others is more beneficial than holding on to anger. The sermon touched me deeply, and I felt I had no choice but to abandon my plan. The pastor made an utter call for those who needed grace to forgive those who had hurt them. I jumped out and went forward, and he prayed for us. I felt like a heavy rock has been lifted off my chest, and I have felt light and free. In that moment, I wish I could just die and go to heaven to escape the troubles of this world. When I got home that day, I prepared my dad's favorite meal to show him that I have forgiven him. Nike, I'm grateful you have forgiven me, he said, holding my hand as I served him his food and whispering in my ears. On Monday, my dad surprised me with a big phone he had ordered from the UK. He knew how much I wanted, but my mom had always refused to let him buy one. This girl is too young to own a phone, she warned him repeatedly. If you buy her a phone, I will smash it on the floor, she threatened. She insisted that none of us would get a phone until we turned 18. I enjoyed my phone for 3 months without my mom knowing. Whenever she was around, I would turn it off, remove the battery and hide it under the bed until she left. Just as I was gaining my dad's confidence, it struck again. My academic performance began to drop. My position in class slipped from 2nd or 3rd to 37th. I started to lose interest in my study. My mind was clouded with sexual thoughts at 17. I had turned to a sex addict. My dad could no longer meet my sexual need. So I arranged for my school boys and teachers to have sex with me when the urge comes. I was catched with Ahmed having sex in the toilet, and the matter was reported to the vice principal. He invited both of us to his office to investigate the matter, but when he was caught in the web of the seducing spirit in me, I slept with him 3 times and the case was closed. When the urge comes upon me, I can sleep with any guy available. It was time to write WAEC, and my vice principal had assured me of success if I continued giving him sex. I grabbed the opportunity and made use of it to clear all my papers. I didn't bother to read my books because the vice principal has arranged everything in my favor. When our results were out, I had distinctions in all my papers. Mom was so happy about my results and began to persuade my dad to let them send me to abroad for my university education. My mom and dad began another quarrel over my university education. My dad's business had almost collapsed, so he had only managed to feed us. My mom was the only one responsible for her school fees and other major family bills. On the 8th of March, I felt feverish, so I went to the nearest chemist in our neighborhood to get some medicine. After taking the drugs, I still wasn't feeling better, so I decided to go to Oxford Clinic for some tests. "Young lady, you are 6 weeks pregnant," the lab attendant announced as he handed me the results. I took it without saying a word. When I got home, I dropped the test result on my dad's bed and locked the room to keep my sister from banging in and seeing it. Dad rarely locked his room, so he was surprised when he came back and found it locked. He looked at me and Grace, who were both in the living room when he arrived, but I pretended not to notice him. He seemed to sense that something was wrong, so he took out his key and opened the door. 5 minutes later, he rushed out of the room and called me into his room. "What is the meaning of this?" he asked, pointing to the test result in his hand. I felt angry and wanted to slap him. How could he ask me the meaning of the test result he was holding? Did he not know that having unprotected sex would lead to pregnancy? "Nobody must hear this. Let it be between me and you," my father pleaded. "We will get rid of it before anyone notices it." He did not allow me to go out for 1 week until he came with a taxi driver that morning. He drove us to a long journey. He took me to a small hospital between Lagos and Ogun State, Nigeria, a place very difficult to find anybody who knew us. An abortion was carried out on me. My first sexual encounter was with my dad. My first pregnancy was for my dad, and my first abortion was by my dad. Getting admission into a higher institution became very difficult. Everything in my family turned upside down when Grace fell ill and was diagnosed with a serious heart condition that required emergency surgery in India. The cost of transportation and medical care was in the thousands of dollars. Dad had no money. His business has practically stopped. Mom had emptied all her accounts and borrowed more money to cover Grace's medical bills. Grace and Mom flew to India for the surgery, but everything did not go as planned. The surgery was unsuccessful, and they had to stay for 3 additional weeks for another operation. Mom leaves has expired, and she could not return home because of the extended stay. After several operations to save Grace's life, she tragically passed away while in India. It was a tough time for the family. Mom returned without Grace, and her job was now at risk because she had a huge loan to repay. Upon her arrival, she couldn't resume work immediately and had to wait for a week. Mom's position was given to someone else before she resumed. She was moved to the cash department as a cashier officer, while Mr. Paul became the new branch manager. These changes brought darkness to the Adegbola's family. My pursuit of the admission was put on hold, and Christy had to drop out of school because of unpaid school fees. Faith had only a few months left to write her WAEC exams, so her school fees became a priority. We sought help everywhere, but there were none to be found. 3 days before Faith was supposed to start her WAEC, she fell ill and was rushed to the hospital. It felt like hell has broken loose on the Adegbola's family, with calamity after calamity striking us. If that wasn't enough, Mom lost her job, a position she had held in high esteem. The bank allowed her to finish repaying her loan before firing her, and the blow was devastating. To help raise money for Faith's medical bills, I had to engage in mini prostitution. Our former vice principal became my main client. Even when I was sick, I couldn't talk to anyone about it, fearing it would only add to my family's problem. We began to live a beggarly life, relying heavily on the church for support. Dad had sold everything we owned just to keep us going, and Faith has practically missed her WAEC exams that year. Everything seems to be against us. My tears of agony and pain felt heavier than ever. Our landlord was the only one who seems to understand our situation, but his patience didn't last forever. He eventually came to us, pleading that we should forget the outstanding rent and just vacate his house in 3 months. The man had a kind heart, but he needed to make the difficult decision to recover his property. I had to sleep with our landlord 5 times for him to extend our stay for another 6 months. My parents were not aware of what I did that made the landlord to give us 6-month extension. Out of curiosity, I insisted on knowing what was wrong with Faith, since I was the only one mostly covering the medical bills. No one would tell me anything until I stopped providing money for her care. My mom reluctantly revealed that Faith had an abortion that wasn't well managed and now had complications. As I talk to you right now, your sister's womb has to be removed to save her life. When I heard this, I felt everything was going blank. After a minute, I asked Mom if she knew who impregnated her. No, she replied. She said she doesn't know who was responsible. The doctor had advised us not to bother her for now until she's out of the hospital. I was furious inside. Let it not be what I'm thinking, I told myself. Could it be that Dad had also been sleeping with Faith without my knowledge? Faith was a decent girl, and she can never have any boyfriend. We talk a lot, and I would have known if she was seeing anyone. My reaction worried Mom, but I couldn't share what was on my mind. If Dad is responsible for Faith's pregnancy, I will kill him and then kill myself, I assured myself. My heart felt heavy and weak. Why are all these things happening to us alone, oh God? Have mercy on the Adegbola's family. Grace is gone. Mom lost her job. Faith is lying helplessly in the hospital. That business has totally collapsed, and the landlord has given us an ultimatum to leave the house. I have become a sex addict. Everyone has abandoned us, and even regular food and good life seems impossible to achieve. Christy is at home because of school fees. What is our offense? Why are all these things happening to us at the same time? Who did we offend? What happens to all those prayers Mom said for the family? God, are you even there? When I was left alone with Faith, I hugged her passionately to my heart. Dear, I love you, and you will live to testify of God's goodness, I whispered, filling the silence with words of hope. Faith, I know who is responsible for your pregnancy, I said, looking straight into her eyes for what felt like an eternity. Is he the one? She asked. Her head bent low, tears rolling down her cheeks uncontrollable. In those tears, I saw betrayal, disappointment, dashed hope, hatred, and unexpressed agony. Without needing words, I understood Dad had been doing this to Faith too. But why would Dad be this wicked? Why did he wear the garment of an angel while harboring the heart of a monster? We held each other tightly, both of us sobering bitterly in each other's arm. Faith narrated what he has been through at Dad's hand. My case was pathetic, but hers was far more terrible. For 2 hours, she recounted the painful journey that had been through life since the fateful day. It all began when she was 11 years old, an age when an innocent should be given protected. She spoke of the moment that seems innocent at first, the way he would hug her tightly or tell her how special she was. But gradually, those gestures became something darker. She recounted the manipulations and coercion, how Dad would use guilt and promises to gain her trust, convincing her that their secret was a bond that only they could understand. Each encounter felt like a betrayal, not only of her innocence but also of the family love that should have been existed. As she spoke, I could see the pain etched in her eyes, the scars that those years had left behind. She described the fear that gripped her each day he entered her room, the confusion that clouded her mind as he gripped with the reality of what was happening. It was a nightmare that no child should ever endure. Yet, here she was, living through it day after day. Listening to her, I felt like a wave of anger and sorrow wash over me. We were both victims of the same monster, trapped in a web of betrayal scum by one person who we should have been able to trust the most. Mom was the root of our problems. She was never around when we needed her. Dad took on both the roles of a father and a mother. Mom made Dad's life difficult because she thought she was an unbeliever. Dad never felt close to Mom, so he found comfort in his daughter. If Dad must die, then Mom should die first. I promised myself I would take revenge as long as I live. Faith's womb was removed, but Mom never knew the real reason behind it. Faith was discharged from the hospital. Dad felt ill. He started losing his memory and mental clarity. So he was transferred to a psychiatric hospital for further evaluation. Dad spent 2 weeks there before being discharged, and he began to regain his memory and thought processes. Our 6-month ultimatum from our landlord will expire in a few weeks. He expected me to renew the rent like I did before, but it was too late. I had decided never to do anything evil again. I was committed to keep my body from the Lord from that point on. I couldn't ignore the dream I had and continue living a careless life. My refusal to sleep with him angered Dad so much that he gave us 7 days to move out, instead of the 3 weeks remaining for the original agreement. This time, I wasn't worried because I would rather sleep on the street than offer him my body again. We began to plan our move before the 7 days were up, but we had no money for even a 2-room apartment. I didn't go back to the men I had been with, nor would I allow anyone to use me for money again. Our pastor suggested we move our belongings into the old children's hall at the church. Our burdens were too heavy for the church to handle at this time. All our uncles abandoned us, as if we didn't exist. Leaving our house will bring a lot of embarrassment because of our debt we own in the neighborhood. We eventually moved out things to the whole children's hall in our church and slept there for 2 days before Dad went to stay with a friend. Mom, Faith, and I stayed with a church member. The frustration and humiliation were unbearable, but we had no choice. I attended a program with a friend at the church, and the pastor made an altar call for those waiting to give their life to Christ. I was the first to step out forward. The sermon was too powerful for me to resist. I rededicated my life to Christ, and slowly my peace began to return. However, Dad's head took a turn for the worst. He began to stink, and caring for him became a significant sacrifice. We had no money to provide him with proper care. The church did their best, but they couldn't solve all the problems. I became a regular customer at God's People's Church, where I have given my life to Christ. I never missed their hours of visitation every Friday. Dad's health continued to deteriorate badly. Deliverance was conducted for me, but the pastor said that my family's deliverance will only be complete if my dad confessed all his wrongdoing. On the 16th of December, my dad asked me to invite Pastor Dele and our pastor. I pleaded with Pastor Dele to come and see my dad. He was hesitant at first, feeling he had lost hope in my dad and resolved to let him die in his sins since he refused to confess. However, he eventually agreed and we set a date for the meeting. During the confession, my dad said, "I'm making this confession not because I want God to heal me, but so that my family can be free from the pain I caused them because of my wrongdoing." Please invite more mothers to hear my confession. Our pastor quickly called the women leader of our church, and within 30 minutes, the room was filled to capacity. First, I want to plead for mercy for my beloved daughter Adenike and her sister for all I did to them. Everything that happens was caused by my wife. She prioritized her career over her family and left the care of the children to me. She was never available for us, so I had to take the role of a mother. I was both their father and mother. My wife starved me of responsibility throughout our 30 years of marriage. There were times we would go for 8 months without being intimate with each other as husband and wife. I found comfort in my children, the comfort I never found in my wife. They became my wife I had never had and were also close to me. Threatening my wife with getting sexual satisfaction elsewhere if she would not give me, and she gave me the go ahead. And that was the beginning of evil in my family. I have slept with all my daughters. I have aborted their pregnancy times severally, except for Grace. I molested my daughter for over 2 decades, and my wife was not aware. I did a charm on them to stop them from telling anyone about what I was doing to them. I know I may not live because the day I confess, I would die, according to the juju man. Dad could not complete that statement when he was attacked with hiccup and gave up the ghost. The women in the room could not help back their tears. It was a festival of tears. Everyone in the room wept bitterly, not because my dad passed on, but for the emotion confession. Every member of the family was left with a scar. Faith lost her womb. I was tested HIV positive. Mom went into coma and became paralyzed partially. Christy dropped out of school and Grace died. Look at what the sin of one man caused my family. Mothers who are watching my story should remember that they will face God one day to give account of their roles as mother. Fathers, no matter how much you love your female children, know when to set the boundary. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe, share, comment, and on your notification bell for more videos.